How about this idea about virtue being a choice? So, for example, EJ was saying that that patience is not necessarily a virtue because some people just get pissed off really easily. But that sounds like you don't really have a choice about whether or not you get pissed off. In other words, well, we'll kind of write it off and just say, that's just how I am. That's just how I am. Which suggests that you don't have a choice over how you behave. Your personality is just kind of already set and ingrained. But, what's that?
That's not what I meant.
Well, what do you mean then?
Like, I don't mean like necessarily like just get extremely pissed off at somebody. Like, I just get like sarcastic. I'm just like somebody asks a dumb question like, is the sky blue? I just look at them and be like, no. Like, just,
What if they're colorblind?
huh?
What if they're colorblind?
I don't mean like.
Yeah, EJ, what if they're colorblind?
But like if they're trolling you, like I don't like trolls. Like if they just purposely ask a dumb question and stuff.
You said your personality is already set. Could you change that? Could you change the fact? Could you change your patience if you wanted to?
Yeah.
Exactly. So your personality isn't set yet. That's his whole point.
What she said.
The second part was what I said is I got that attitude.
Yeah, no, but you said it as if your personality was already set in there. So that's just how you get it.
No.
Okay. So you could become more patient.
Yes.
Okay. So now I guess that we kind of ask the question, how easy or how difficult is it to change our stripes? Yeah.
Really hard.
Why? Why is that so difficult?
Some people don't like change.
Yeah, but why not?
They like being comfortable in how they are and around them.
Yeah. So if you're somebody who gets angry easily, not like you, Jay, but if you're someone who gets angry very easily, I wonder how comfortable you are in the world. I don't know. I mean, think about most of our personality types. Most of our personality types, we have significant flaws. So, for example, I was talking to another class yesterday, and I asked about procrastination. It was a completely different context, completely different class. But anybody in here procrastinate? Procrastinator? Okay. So sometimes people. So I guess the question becomes, why do you procrastinate? And some of the answers I hear, people will say things like, well, because I work really well under pressure. I work well under pressure. Bullshit. You do not work well under pressure. No, I do. No, you don't. Physiologically, you do not. There are certain mechanisms in your brain that actually start to misfire, and when you're under stress, we behave very differently under stress. Here's what's happening. Because of a lack of internal motivation, you need that external push to finally start doing something. So, for example, let's say that I ask you to write an essay, and you're like, nah. And then I put a gun to your head and rack it, put the gun in your head, you write that essay right now! Will you start writing the essay?
Yeah.
Probably. Now, how good is that essay going to be?
Not very.
Not very good, because you're under an extreme amount of stress. The difference between me putting a gun to your head or just giving you a very tight deadline and pushing yourself up against that timeline is the amount of stress that you're enduring at that moment. The more stress that you're under, the less well that you're going to perform. There are some people who perform exceptionally well under stress. We know their names, though, because those people are so unique. We find a lot in professional sports. And even most professional athletes don't perform well under stress. They perform better than the average person because they're more used to it. In fact, if I instead said, here's an essay, like for example, when I over at the college, I'll give my students an essay and say, on Monday, this essay is due 2 weeks from today. If you go home and write the essay that day, a first draft, and then you come back in 2 or 3 days after that and you revised it, then you come back and then you revise it 2 or 3 days after that, and then maybe give it another week and then you revise it before finally turning it in. Think about that product versus the one that you write the night before. And if you're thinking like, well, I'd still write better the night before, you're not thinking of it the right way. You're thinking of it as you would need that kind of push and stress in order to motivate you to do the right thing. Aristotle actually has a wonderful quote. He says, I gained this from philosophy. I gained this from philosophy. That I do without being commanded what other people only do under threat of the law. And I'll say that again. I do without being commanded what others will only do under threat of the law. Meaning that I'll do the right thing, even if I don't have the law, even if I don't have the state standing above me telling me you must do this thing. Even if I don't have that teacher for some reason holding a Glock to my head. I'll still do the right thing. And that tells you a personality type such that he is self-motivated. Now the question I guess can become, was he born this way? In which case it's easier for him, of course. Or was he not born this way, but perhaps he had parents who really shoved him into that, which is very likely. Does anybody know who Aristotle's teacher was? Very famous teacher. Plato. Not Plato, Plato. And who was Plato's teacher? Yes, say it louder. Socrates, yes. Socrates. And so you have this amazing line of people, Socrates to Plato to Aristotle. And Aristotle, by the way, Aristotle wrote so much that some historians question whether or not it's all really his writing. Because they wonder how could a human being have written as much as that guy did. And then we have other examples in history of people who wrote almost as much. And then we can say, okay, well maybe it is possible to write that much. But the point is that when we put ourselves under this extreme stress, we're demonstrating that we do have the ability to get things done. But we're also demonstrating a personality type that we won't do without command of the law. What others will do without command of the law. We have to have that person standing up. So for example, in this class, I give you a lot of freedom, of course. I give you a lot of freedom. I give you the work, I sit there and I ask, you have any questions, let me know. But you notice I don't come and stand above you. Come on, you guys, get the work done. You can do this. And I'm not that guy. Do you have teachers like this?
No.
So if that worked, you wouldn't need me to be doing that. Because you would already have that characteristic built into you from all those other teachers who have done that over the years. But if you don't, then it certainly doesn't help for me to stand above you and do that if getting that self-motivated characteristic into you is important, if this makes sense. And so, if you have the power to work under stress, to get motivated by that, that means that you do have the power to start early as well. I'll say that again. If you have the power to be motivated, under pressure, after procrastination to get something done, then that means that you also have the power to start early, the day something is assigned. And it's not just school, of course. It's going to be anything, really, in life at all. Especially if you're thinking about work. But you have to find that kind of a motivation. You have to understand that you're going to perform better under those kinds of conditions. Your work is going to be better. It's a higher level of responsibility, if this makes sense. So virtue is in our power, of course, but by the way, so is the ability to do wrong. And it comes down to this thing of choice. That's why I made such an issue about the idea earlier. If you're someone who's just by nature an angry person, sometimes we'll say, that's just how I am. And then we'll write it off as though we couldn't be better. But if you have the power to be that way, you also have the power to be another way. Because as soon as you say that you have this, well, now that opens up all kinds of levels of responsibility. It's one of those reasons, by the way, that people like to say that we don't have the power to choose. Because as soon as you realize that you have the power to choose, you now have the responsibility to choose. Whether you take the responsibility or not, you're still making a choice. In other words, if you're by nature an angry person, and of course we do exist, then you have that choice to be angry or to work against your nature. And you might just say, well, I can't do anything about it. Well, then you've chosen. You've chosen to not do something about it. And fill in any other kind of characteristic here. You guys remember this? I drew this line a lot last semester, if you remember this. This is Aristotle's, it comes from him, the doctrine of the mean. If you're someone who is not patient enough, what would we call you? What's that? Someone who hears him help me out.
Ill-tempered.
Ill-tempered, okay. How can you be so big and so quiet? Ill-tempered. I still can't hear you. So, ill-tempered. And someone who's too patient? take it. Why not? You're someone who's too patient, maybe you're a doormat. It's a horrible way of thinking about it, but yeah, maybe. So every virtue is a mean between two vices. The one we talked about last semester was courage. If you're someone who's got too much courage, you're reckless. And if you're someone who's got too little courage, you're a coward. That idea of virtues being midpoints between two vices, that comes from him. It's the doctrine of the mean. So how is it that you know what is enough patience? How do you know it's not too much or too little? That's wisdom, man. How do you know when it's enough courage? Not too much, not too little. That's wisdom. Wisdom is being able to discern those differences. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?